Over the last few weeks, social media has been on fire with talk of Alchemized by Sin Lin Yu. My name is Taylor Rose, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything reading and writing. If you don't know the background behind this novel, it was originally an extremely popular Harry Potter fanfiction on AO3, or Archive of Our Own. The fanfic was removed from the site since it was going to become a novel, which is totally understandable. Obviously, you don't want people comparing your new work to the original fanfiction work. Also, probably a way to drive traffic to the new thing. You can't access the old? Well, here's an alternative. According to a screenshot I found of the Manacled page on AO3 back from December 2024, states that it was 370,000 words divided into 77 chapters, and it had almost 10 million views, which is a lot of eyes. A lot of eyes hit Manacled. Basically, because of this, there is a lot of conversation about whether or not it is ethical to publish a fan fiction. If you're familiar with any of this, you probably know that 50 Shades of Grey was Twilight fan fiction originally. Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood was originally Reylo fan fiction, so the newest Star Wars trilogy. And there are many others. Most often, fan fiction is written specifically to entertain questions about what if something else happened in the story? What if the canon wasn't canon and we branched off in this other direction? I wasn't really that big a fan of those types of stories. I personally preferred AUs, or alternate universes, so same characters as the reader can connect with them, put into a different setting. So for example, one of the best Hobbit fanfictions I ever read was a modern day AU where all the dwarves were firefighters and Bilbo was Bilba, a girl who was an underwear model for Gandalf. And it sounds crazy when you describe it like that, but it was so well written. Like, it was incredible. It was an amazing piece of work. Never finished as far as I know. Generally speaking, though, fan fiction is specifically about fictional characters. There is a subset of fan fiction that actually writes about real people. Bands, for example, or different celebrities. You've probably heard that ever since Taylor Swift has gotten into a relationship with Travis Kelce, people are writing like football romances that are clearly meant to be them. And obviously these romance novels are pretty spicy. It just kind of like blurs the lines on what is actually ethical. Anyways, Manacled fell into the area of what if. The Manacled summary is as follows. Harry Potter is dead. In the aftermath of the war, in order to strengthen the might of the magical world, Voldemort enacts a repopulation effort. Hermione Granger has an order secret lost but hidden in her mind, so she is sent as an enslaved surrogate to the High Reeve until her mind can be cracked. So you can kind of see where that's going. It's Harry Potter and the Handmaid's Tale, if they had a baby, and Voldemort won, obviously. A lot of people dislike this trope specifically, the Hermione Draco bullied captor-captive type tropes. However, despite people's mixed thoughts on the original content, it is widely perceived as a very emotionally compelling story. Obviously super duper long, but people are like, oh, the tragedy, just twisting the knife in your heart. We love it. Because of this, I don't think people were too surprised to hear that Manacled was being adapted into a novel, what would eventually become Alchemized. However, what I think people were not expecting is that Alchemized would get a 7-figure movie deal. Reportedly $3 million paid for this story to be made into a movie. Pretty wild. It was reported on by The Hollywood Reporter, as well as by Rolling Stone, and IGN also posted about it, saying that, well, the movie rights have been acquired by Legendary Pictures for reportedly over $3 million. People definitely have some thoughts So Lily Mead on Threads posted about the movie deal. The Alchemized movie deal, former Draco Hermione fanfic, and the fact it sold for $3 million, the largest book-to-movie deal ever, is making me uncomfortable. It's less about who the IP is supporting for me, but the fact that publishing and now Hollywood are willing to drop multiple millions to reframe fan works instead of supporting original work to generate new fandoms instead. Think of how many incredible worlds could have been championed with $3 million. People have been complaining about this in the movie sphere for a long time. We're just, for example, Disney, we're just getting live action remakes of historically popular Disney movies. And then these new ones aren't doing as well because they change things integral to the story that made the original story popular. So to me, this just feels like an extension of that. Lily continues, I don't know the exact numbers, but I've heard the book deal in the first place was also 7 figures. It's frustrating to see so much money dumped into profiting on something that used to be free. Yeah. Reads by Vanshika posted, truly disgusting how Alchemized by Sin Lin Yu got movie rights sold for $3 million nonetheless, apparently also one of the largest books-to-screen adaptation deals made. No matter how much the publisher and the author preach about not associating this book with JKR's Harry Potter series, it's always going to be the famous fanfiction work that was adapted into a novel that is always going to have more unoriginal concepts than original ones. The cover artist for the book is a well-known AI artist. No matter how many statements they get out, it's never going to be convincing enough. The current headlines of the movie news directly use the word Harry Potter, and someone like JKR, who monetizes every small thing and inspects everything in her brand, is obviously going to get some form of financial compensation for this. There's a fucking rapist to lover trope in this book that is disgusting enough. So I will say, obviously the original story had the procreation aspect to it. I have read the sample of Manacled. I'm not going to buy it. That aspect in particular does seem to be removed from the plot. From reviews of people who have read both the original fanfiction and now the book, they say plot is the same. It's just that one particular aspect that's gone. As much as readers say they won't romanticize it, there's a huge part of the book's audience who will dangerously interpret it such. Not only is the author's background for this book extremely harmful, a fanfiction world derived from the Harry Potter series written by a homophobic author who funds anti-transgender organizations with the profits she receives from her books, but the theme of rapist to lover, no matter how well done, will always be harmful. Again, I can't say anything to this specifically on whether or not that is still in the book, but I agree that is kind of questionable as a theme overall. So a lot of people try to argue that clearly Alchemized has nothing to do with Harry Potter anymore, but people on Threads bring up some good points. We have Tori Loves Happily Ever Afters, who says, I've seen multiple people try to say that Sin Lin Yu has never explicitly stated that Alchemized is a rework of Manacled, and I wish I had the capability of living in whatever alternate Delulu reality y'all live in. What the hell, girl? Sure, whatever you say, I guess. And Luna Turning Pages responds, I mean, there are literal direct quotes in the book pulled straight out of Manacled. LOL, IDK why people are trying to pretend it's not. And Legally Bookish Serena adds, I've seen this so many times when this topic keeps popping up. This is a hobby. The issue is you choosing a book you want to read for fun that a marginalized community is saying is actively harming them. Mature adults are capable of choosing human lives and dignity over one topic of 73 billion other topics available in a hobby. Geek and Artsy Bookish says, I won't read it because the cover artist is an AI user and I'd rather not support that whole combination of factors. So they linked to this article about the cover artist, Eva Eller, who has stated in interviews that AI is a part of their process. People are saying the artist has never admitted to using AI. This article is one of them. She has admitted it. Whether or not it was used in this cover is up for debate. I personally would not believe someone who says that they love using XYZ tool to then turn around and say, but obviously I didn't use it in this one cover. Like, okay. Elm Reads Books responds, from my experience, the publishers have very actively tried to distance themselves from the source materials, which was not the case with the other two. So the other two being The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy and then Rose in Chains. Sin is a non-binary author. The content I've read so far in Alchemized is so vastly different from HP, and the only similarities really are the plot beats, but nothing about the world or characters feels the same, other than hair color. From what I've seen, the only people saying it's Manacled are in fandom/bookstores going rogue. I was invited along to one of the pub events for this book, and the editor/publishers were there. Hermione wasn't mentioned once, and if anyone brought up Manacled, they weren't given a direct answer, and the subject was changed, so shrug. I really do feel like they're trying to distance themselves. Sin wrote a masterpiece with Manacled, and I understand why they would want the opportunity to turn that into original work and make money. I object to this statement on multiple points, and ageless ignorance kind of sums up a lot of my thoughts on the topic. Sinlin Yu has not done the work to distance Alchemized from Manacled. Stop effing lying. Draco and Hermione are littered across their social media, and the book's connection to the fic is in big glowing lights across social media and in every news outlet that covers it. The fact of the matter is that Alchemized is inextricably tied to Manacled and the HP brand, and it always will be, because not a soul alive would care or know who Sinlin Yu is if not for Harry Potter fanfics. Moniza Hossein says, one of my favorite fanfic writers who I found through Harry Potter fanfiction went legit and published original fiction. And guess what? She used her own name to publish and did not invoke Harry Potter in any shape or form or tap into the fandom in any way. It's that easy. And Taylor M. Stinson says, if you're talking about Olivia Blake, yes, she is so good. And Moniza retweeted this post by The Veriest, who said, if the author of Alchemized didn't want their work to be forever associated with Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, then maybe they shouldn't have published their scrubbed Hermione fanfic under their AO3 username. Just a thought. Exactly. That is a username. It just reminds me of how actors and singers sometimes, like the children of very famous people in the industry, choose to use a different name in order to separate themselves from their parent. And while arguably people in the industry still know the connection, the general populace doesn't. For example, Nicolas Cage. His name is Nicholas Coppola. He is related to Francis Ford Coppola, the director. Angelina Jolie is the daughter of John Voight. Her name is Angelina Voight. Elle King is the daughter of Rob Schneider. Olivia Wilde is related to some famous journalists. So she used a different name when she decided to be an actor to separate herself from her family. Nora Jones is the daughter of Ravi Shankar. Clint Eastwood's son attempted to do this because his mom gave him her last name, Reeves. He tried to be an actor under the name Scott Reeves, didn't do particularly well, so he was like, you know what, actually I want to be part of the family legacy, so now he goes by Scott Eastwood. Then there's Martin Sheen. His son Charlie Sheen used his name, but his other son goes by Emilio Estevez. So a lot of people don't know those connections. A lot of those connections might be really surprising to people, and that's on purpose. MK Lob posted this thread saying, honestly, no argument about it's separate from the original fanfiction, it stands alone. Makes any sense simply because the book is 1,000 pages. A trad publisher would almost certainly not buy or publish a 1,000-page debut novel unless they were relying on that built-in fandom and people making those connections. I'm sorry, but come on. Like, if you've decided you don't care and you're going to support it anyway, fine, I guess. You're probably not going to listen to me or anyone else, but at least be honest about what it is. LMAO. And Andrea Eames, author, says, right, it's the pretense for me. Like, just admit you're putting everything else to one side because you enjoy it. I mean, if you're familiar with Brandon Sanderson's career at all, he wrote The Way of Kings years and years and years and years and years ago. And obviously it's like 1,000+ pages. He could not get it published. So he wrote a bunch of other books that were shorter, reworked The Way of Kings. And now that he has name recognition, brand recognition, he was able to publish that series, which is going to be 10 books long. And obviously, like, the expectations between genres are different. Approximately a good estimate for the length a book will be based on the word count is 250 words per page. So an 80,000 word novel, which is like kind of seen like typical, pretty much all the genres overlap, whether that's on the long side or on the short side, but that's roughly 320 pages. So 3 times as long as that is what we're saying. According to the site Career Authors, literary agent Paula Munier says a 90,000 word count is the sweet spot for debut fiction. Also, what publisher gives a debut author $1 million deals and 750,000 first print run these days, unless it comes with a built-in fandom? And the OP says, seriously though, literally every argument I've seen falls apart when you consider these things. Haha. La Louisiane B writes, and the world building required to remove HP in the Handmaid's Tale IP is the reason for the bloat too. Gotta make up for the gaping holes punched in it by removing the source fanfiction. And I have to agree, having read this sample, you get like 2 pages of what I consider normal prose in a fantasy novel, and then there would be at least a page of info dumping, giving me the history of the city, the history of the Alchemist Tower, the religion going on, the types of magic. If all of those had been removed and somehow integrated into the story in a better way, I probably wouldn't have gotten bored reading the sample. But one thing to consider when you are doing kind of like info dumping in your story, sometimes it's necessary. Like there are times you have to get information across to a reader ASAP, and it's not something that can just be breadcrumbed through the story. But in those cases, I think it does much better when it is being filtered through the perspective of the POV character. And that's what would get me. I'd be reading this, it's like paragraph of just like info dump. And then the last paragraph would be through Helena's perspective. And it was like, that's so much better. I'm getting her feelings, her thoughts on this, instead of being like, the city started with a tower built on the north end of the island, and then as the city grew, it filled up the island, and then we made the second island. You know, it was just like, I don't know why more of it couldn't have been through her, filtered through her perspective. It would have made it a lot more interesting. And also, another thing that got me is that so essentially what's going on is that Helena, they lose the war, the resistance, the Order of the Eternal Flame, Order of the Phoenix, guys, come on. After they lose the war, everyone's executed in public, but for some reason she's put into a cryo tank essentially, and for reasons unknown, she's the only one to actually like really survive the cryo tanks because everyone just starts rotting. So they have these like cryo tanks of people soup, but she's the only one who made it for some reason. They don't know why, and they pull her out, and they're all suspicious. But she's supposed to be like barely conscious, like she can't see, she can't move, she can't speak. She's just like, I'm in so much pain. But then somehow we're given the entire conversation, all the conversation going around her, minute detail of what everyone's saying. Yeah, I'm guessing like in third person limited, that makes sense because you're not really supposed to be in the head of the person. But then we go back to Helena all the time and we're basically in her head as she's thinking about stuff. So it's like, the only reason we got such detailed conversations is specifically for info dumping purposes. The person who's examining her, for some reason, instead of like talking to herself, like, wow, I've never seen anything like this, the striation on her brain or whatever, it's her being like, did you know that XYZ happens when you do X science thing? And wow, I've never seen anything like this. Have you heard of this before? Talking to this unconscious woman. If there had been like a new recruit or something in the room that like that Stroud, the like more experienced person, was like, hey newbie, take a look at this. You'll never see anything like this in your life. You know, something, I don't know. That's probably just me being picky, but I think it would have come off a lot better because I was just sitting there like, I don't believe any of this would naturally happen in this setting. In any case, so obviously we looked at this one earlier from Hollywood Reporter, but again, specifically Alchemized, book that began as Harry Potter fanfiction, exclusive, and adapted Harry Potter fanfics, the season's most anticipated novel. The movie rights to Sinlin Yu's Alchemized, which began as Harry Potter fanfiction about Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. Sinlin Yu's Alchemized is officially getting a movie adaptation with Draco and Hermione. Calling all Hermione fans, if you loved Manacled, and this new reads for you. And then Sinlin Yu's own Instagram. Harry Potter fanfic Manacled has the internet under its spell. So honored to chat with Maddie Ellis at the Today Show about my writing journey and to share some new details about Alchemized. Another post. A complete audio fic of Manacled is now available on Spotify. They're still advertising their Harry Potter fanfiction. Again, this was 2021, but supposedly Sinlin Yu's been claiming previously that they stopped writing Harry Potter fanfiction after JKR's true colors were shown. Clearly not. February 2021, 2-3 years after people first started boycotting JKR, author D.M. Simmons posted some quotes from the article that Sinlin Yu did with the Today Show. This is my way to take ownership back, i.e. profit off work based on someone else's IP. Alchemized will be a reimagined version of Manacled, i.e. changes made so it doesn't use IP and name but still marketed as such. Part of the goal in reimagining Manacled was to combat illegal sales of the fanfiction and mostly being written for new readers, i.e. updated for profit. Story is proof still using HPIP with spit shining. Everly Claire author responds, all just different ways of justifying why it's okay to publish this when we all know the only reason is because they paid me a lot of money. And the OP says, right, because of its IP is the reason why it's getting $1 million deal. It's already tapped into an IP that makes money. It's a sure thing, especially when they keep marketing it that way. It is such a slap in the face to the thousands of authors who are creating original IP every day that deserve a chance and will likely never see the light of day in this way. Yeah, it's really depressing. And kind of what gets me, I guess we have The Walking Dead and then the 28 Days Later series and stuff. At least from what I understand, like, it is so expensive to do the zombies and stuff. And literally from the sample, the majority of the characters are corpses. The majority of people that she interacts with are necrothralls, so dead slaves who are being controlled by necromancy. I don't know. I just feel like if you want to read that type of book, you should just go read Gideon the Ninth. Impeccably done. Great necromancy. So a lot of people are also talking about the connection between the book and JKR. Shelves of Casey says, IDK if it's just me, but I feel pretty weird about reading Alchemized. I feel like JKR is definitely getting some form of money from this. I've seen that thing marketed as HP fanfiction a bunch of times, and there's no way someone as litigious as JKR would let that go. I read Rose and Chains because I got an arc, but I don't think I'll go buy it or continue reading because it feels kind of like supporting JKR. Maybe I'm wrong? And the TARDIS Free Library says, you're not wrong. The trans community have asked us not to read /support /platform these fanfic rebranded because it helps keep HP relevant and puts money in JKR's pocket. Money she has said she will use to fund trans exclusion. I also agree that she must be getting pretty direct kickbacks. She has shut down small Etsy stores for carrying non-licensed stuff. She wouldn't just let this slide if there wasn't something in it for her. Gabby the writer says, it comes down to these books not being able to fully detach themselves from starting as Harry Potter fanfic. They're still being promoted as such by the publishers and people online. Talking about HP keeps it socially relevant and does put money in JKR's pockets as well, which is especially heinous since she has admitted to using that money to fund anti-trans legislation in the UK. As for Sinlin Yu, the rights to make Alchemized a movie were sold for $3 million. They will be okay. Yeah. Kim's Bookery Nookery says this, reading/posting about HP fanfic that's been trad published tells publishers that the HP IP is still culturally relevant and future books with inspiration of the IP will still sell. It also indirectly continues public interest in HP itself. It leads to someone reading Alchemized and wanting to the nostalgia of the original source material and watching the movies on streaming services or buying the books or even borrowing from the library. Honestly, this is just a call to let HP die out completely. Neon Kit Kats says, I have a friend who calls consuming without directly putting money in pockets, giving her cultural currency, which is basically talk hype relevance that keeps her IP alive. Great term. Great term. Lady Charlotte King says, imagine this situation. Someone scrolling online and sees Alchemized or any other trad published HP fanfic. They become interested in it and start looking into it. Now, say they've never read HP or haven't in a while, so before they read these books, they go out and buy HP first, thus putting money in JKR's pockets. That is how this ends up becoming harmful, especially when the author will not separate their works from HP. I mean, I personally have seen, and I'm not posting these people because I'm not trying to call people out for things, but I've seen multiple people posting, oh, I'm rereading Harry Potter before reading Alchemized. Or this woman who was saying she was so excited for Alchemized to come out and she can't wait for the day it's published, and then in the background has Harry Potter playing on the television. It's just kind of like, what? Pedro Paro 2 says, let's be very clear. It does not matter if the publisher/marketers of those books made a deal with that woman for money. If the kids of the local KKK Grand Dragon set up an adorable lemonade stand, you don't fork over the penny for a drink. Oh, but the kids aren't involved in the other stuff. The penny isn't helping their dad. Everyone loves lemonade. It's about the other stuff, y'all. It's about being 2 degrees away from an unabashed bigotry normal. Get a drink someplace else. And the Story Wanderer adds, there's a reason no one ever had a meltdown before for doing fan spinoffs of that IP. A very HP musical sold out every night and did a sequel and kicked off Darren Chris's career. But they didn't get sued or pay rights or make a deal. Yes, they claimed fair use, but the bigger reason? Whispers. Because it was good for the brand. She didn't even attempt to go after them because things like that are good for the brand. Pedro says, in retrospect, I kind of hate a Harry Potter musical for making people think the series proper was more progressive than it actually is. Lillian C. Reed says, especially when, in this analogy, right down the street there are 1,000 other lemonade stands set up by kids who don't have clan families, and these people are going out of their way specifically to support the problematic one. There are thousands of great books out there in whatever genre you like that don't come from questionable authors, y'all. Go read literally anything else. Bookosaurus Bex says, so endlessly disappointed to see people I thought were allies screaming about Alchemized yesterday. One big book group I followed doing it as their monthly read. When contacted, said it wasn't connected with Hermione, so wasn't harmful to the trans community, so would be proceeding. At this stage, you are willfully promoting these or you are not. Including many screenshots, including some posted from the writer themselves confirming this in case you face similar greenwashing. Bookish Corvid says, for those stating it doesn't lead back to the IP, I want to remind you of the large TikTok account who was gifted a copy of Manacled, then did a series of videos on all the HP books as she read them, then bought merch, read Manacled, then started promoting the show. Not everyone operates this way, obviously, but enough will find out it previously had ties to HP and go buy the books and talk about them, or buy copies of Manacled because they don't care about how bad it is to buy it. Not a single person that I have seen has said not to buy it, or to not read fanfic at all. Just don't promote it. I used to bind it and post about my binds. Then I listened when the trans community said talking about fanfic is still hurtful, so I don't talk about it or promote it. Buy it, don't buy it, your choice. But promoting it does indeed lead back to JKR. These rewrites were not handled the way others have been. They were all promoted as fanfic rewrites and lead straight back to HP. And again, this just ties back to the pen name. If they had changed their pen name, I would have genuinely believed they were making an effort. Jamila B. Reedon says, I don't see enough people talking about the fact that Sinlin Yu has decided to publish Alchemized with their fic handle. I would imagine if you wanted to be fully distanced from the source material, you choose a different pen name. A lot of people feel like Alchemized isn't actually getting enough hate. Chaotic Bookshelf 13 says, I know I'm going to regret asking this because some of y'all like to tussle, but why is Alchemized not getting anywhere near the hate Rose and Chains did for being HP fanfic, not the writing? And Fox Kelly Books answers, because Rose and Chains was marketed as HP fanfic heavily. Sinlin Yu has begged people to stop associating HP with the book as they want it to stand on its own despite its origin. That's my understanding anyway. Arguably, no. Chaotic Bookshelf says, does Sinlin Yu use they them pronouns? I wasn't aware and apologize if so, but I thought in Manacled they used the actual HP character names though. I haven't read any of them other than the first few chapters of RIC and then soft DNF because I couldn't get into it. And Fox says, yes, they use they, she. Manacled is absolutely HP fanfic using HP characters, but it's my understanding they completely rewrote it, created an entirely new magic system that's different, and just used the base story idea, the captivity basically. So it's derivative, but not fanfic. And Chaotic Bookshelf says, gotcha, I think maybe I just don't understand what's considered fanfic and what's not. I just found out that Love Hypothesis is Rilo fanfic. I think this person just has a general misunderstanding. But Fox Kelly clarifies, fanfics are just stories written using someone else's characters and or world. You cannot profit off it since it's someone else's IP. Selling bound fics is 100% illegal. A lot of trad books started as fics. The rule is you have to remove and rewrite anything and everything that belongs to the original work. 50 Shades of Grey is Twilight fanfic turned trad too. There is a lot. Princess Weeks says, I think it's because Sin is not cis and not white, which complicates the common refrain of HP fanfiction turned trad pub being something that is inherently anti-trans and those within the trans umbrella. I think that the conversation was also poorly handled in the articles that happened early. The Well-Read Nurse says, what's the point because the masses didn't listen last time, and from my understanding, Sinlin Yu has worked hard to separate their work from HP. Self-Indulgence Tacoma, a romance-only bookstore that opened recently, posted this really good thread on why they won't be carrying Alchemized. So they say, why you won't see Alchemized at Shelf Indulgence. We've had so many of you ask if we'll be carrying Alchemized. We want to be transparent. The answer is no, and here's why. Our commitment. Shelf Indulgence was built to be an inclusive space for romance readers. That means prioritizing books that uplift, not ones that carry baggage from harmful legacies or undercut the artistry of our community. There are thousands of incredible romance authors, indie and trad, writing original stories that deserve the spotlight. That's where we'll always put our energy, our support, and our shelf space. Because books should make us feel seen, safe, and celebrated always. The origin story matters. Alchemized began life as Harry Potter fanfiction. While fanfic has always been a space for creativity and community, these roots mean the story is tied to J.K. Rowling's world. And Rowling has made it clear where she stands, using her platform to harm trans people. We refuse to celebrate works that extend her legacy, even indirectly. Art should be human. The published edition of Alchemized also uses an AI-generated cover. In an industry already stacked against creatives, replacing illustrators and designers with machines doesn't reflect the future we want to build. Our shelves are for real authors, real artists, and real voices. This decision is about us and the standards we've set for our own store. It isn't about criticizing other bookstores or readers. Everyone engages with stories in their own way. We simply want to be transparent about why you won't find Alchemized on our shelves and what values guide us in making those choices. So someone had asked, do you have proof that they used AI? And Olivia Tilden says, the artist states that this specific cover isn't AI generated, but openly admits to using AI in other designs. There are several features on the front cover that are incredibly common AI artifacts that make it hard to trust that the artist didn't just lie because the publisher asked them to. Shelf Indulgence later made another post. Didn't expect our last post to get so much traction. We want you to know that these decisions aren't made lightly. We spend real time asking what inclusivity looks like in practice, not just on paper. And for us, this book wasn't it. Thanks for being here in the conversation with us. And they posted this long PDF. I'll go ahead and include the link in the description, but we're going to go over it. So they go over a few things, such as Alchemized, why context matters. When we talk about Alchemized, it's essential to do so with the full context. This isn't just another debut fantasy romance novel. It is the commercialized, rebanded version of one of the most famous Harry Potter fanfics ever written, Manacled. That fact matters because of how it was marketed, what communities it impacts, and the questions it raises about the ethics of monetized fanfiction. Direct ties to Harry Potter and Manacled in marketing. So Business Insider reported clearly, Sinlin Yu's popular Harry Potter fanfiction Manacled, a dark Hermione romance. Hollywood Reporter, Legendary pays 7 figures for Alchemized, book that began life as Harry Potter fanfiction. The AV Club, a Harry Potter fanfiction nabs biggest book-to-movie deal of the year. Wikipedia confirms the debut traditionally published novel Alchemized, a rewrite of Manacled, set outside of the Harry Potter universe. Even if Sinlin Yu really were trying to stop people from mentioning it, clearly, to me, this just indicates that her publisher themselves haven't tried to do anything to limit people from making this connection. And it's not just news sources marketing this book in this manner, bookstores such as Barnes & Nobles as well. So this is an email from Barnes & Nobles drawing the connection. Furthermore, Sinlin Yu posted directly confirming direct ties of this book in their very famous fanfiction. This could have been a moment to say, no, Alchemized is its own story. And we have Sinlin Yu's Instagram. They go on to talk about why Alchemized is harmful even as a rewrite. The DNA of the story is still Harry Potter. Even after edits, Alchemized exists because of Manacled, a Draco-Hermione fanfic. The central relationship dynamic, plot arc, and tone were built in Rowling's world. Readers aren't hyped because of Alchemized originality, they're hyped because of its fanfic reputation. Publishers and Hollywood executives paid 7 figures for the film rights, precisely because it came from a viral Harry Potter fic. Rewriting the surface doesn't change the fact that the book's cultural capital and visibility flow from its connection to Rowling's IP. Commercializing fanfiction breaks fandom's social contract. Fanfiction thrives on gift culture. Works are shared freely without expectation of profit, which allows creators and readers to experiment, remix, and play without fear. Publishing fic for money, even rewritten fic, exploits trust built in fandom spaces. Profits from the unpaid labor of a community that made the fic famous in the first place. Reinforces a precedent that fic is just a draft for profit, eroding safe, non-commercial spaces. As scholar Karen Hellickson wrote in Fan Studies, gift culture underpins fandom. Monetization transforms fanish labor into exploitation. And they continue, it keeps Rowling in cultural circulation. Even if Rowling doesn't earn royalties, visibility itself is power. Every time media outlets describe Alchemized as a Harry Potter fanfic turned bestseller, they remind the world of Rowling's universe. This maintains Harry Potter's cultural capital, which Rowling then uses to amplify her anti-trans platforms. It keeps HP fanfiction as a pipeline to mainstream publishing, normalizing the idea that Rowling's world remains a legitimate launchpad. For many trans and queer readers, that's painful. It means their communities are continually tied back to the work of a creator who actively campaigns against their rights. It's a particularly cruel irony for trans readers. Because the author of Alchemized identifies as non-binary, some readers expected a more responsible handling of IP ties. Instead, trans readers have said it feels like a betrayal, using Rowling's world to build profit while trans people continue to be harmed by Rowling's rhetoric. Or a slap in the face, to watch a marginalized author leverage HP visibility without addressing the damage that visibility does to the trans community. This isn't abstract. Trans fans have written extensively about how Rowling's IP and its continued monetization re-traumatizes them. So then they go ahead and list some sources and quotes that they felt were relevant or contextual to this whole situation. And they continue, the rewrite model rewards derivation, not innovation. That was hard to pronounce. The publishing deal isn't for an original story built from scratch, it's for a cosmetically scrubbed fanfic with millions of pre-existing readers. It has 2 harmful effects. It crowds out marginalized authors who are trying to sell fully original work without the built-in fanbase of Harry Potter fic. It incentivizes publishers to hunt for viral fanfiction instead of investing in genuinely new voices. In other words, rewriting fic perpetuates inequity in publishing, where derivative work gets prioritized because it comes with guaranteed hype. And they go on to talk about the cover. When a book enters the world, its cover is more than packaging. It is the first point of contact between reader and story, a promise of aesthetic, tone, and care. For Alchemized, the cover reveal was meant to mark its transition from fanfic into the sphere of mainstream publishing. Instead, it has become another flashpoint, raising questions about artistic labor, ethics, and the very sincerity of the claim that this work is separate from its origins in Harry Potter. And so, some evidence of this. 1. Artist attribution for Alchemized. In the Alchemized cover reveal, the cover designer is listed as Regina Flath, and the credited artist is Eva Eller. The author, Sinlin Yu, publicly stated that they were deeply inspired by the Alchemist cover by the talented Eva Eller art. On the Alchemist site and publishing blurbs, an interior black and white illustration is credited to the artist Avondale. Ties to Manacled. In Sinlin Yu's Wikipedia page, it's mentioned that the fan artist Avondale created companion illustrations for Manacled. Because Avondale is cited as doing interior illustration work for Alchemized, a published book, there's a direct lineage from the fanfic visual world into the new product. Putting this together, the author and publisher have not fully severed Alchemized from its fanfic visual lineage. Even as they claim to remove Harry Potter connections, they retain visual channels the same artist or one who worked with the original fic. that maintain an aesthetic bridge between the two works. Why does this matter? Visual continuity carries narrative and branding value. Readers often absorb associations through visuals more quickly than through text. If the cover feels like Manacled through style, mood, or the same artist's hand, the effort to rebrand Alchemized as wholly original is undercut. The visual language itself becomes a carrier of the association. 2. It signals that rewrite may be cosmetic. If you're trying to convince people that the new work is independent, why preserve the same visual ties? Hiring the same or closely affiliated artist suggests the branding value of those original associations still matters. It looks less like a deep rewrite and more like a reshelving of the same content. Respect, credit, and transparency concerns. If that artist is known within the fan communities, it could feel like a continuation of fan labor being monetized without full transparency. Critics may call out whether the artist was fairly compensated or whether expectations were altered given the shift from fan spaces to the traditionally published world. And finally, it weakens claims of "we've distanced ourselves from HP/Manacled." In marketing, the publisher and author often emphasize that Alchemized is set outside the Harry Potter universe, with new characters, names, and magical systems. But choosing a visual designer or artist tied to Manacled complicates that claim. It prompts the question, if you genuinely wanted distance, why retain the same visual aesthetic voice? The artist linked to Manacled and AI allegations. One of the most striking critiques centers on the artists associated with Alchemized and their relationship to both Manacled and AI usage. On Reddit, a user researching the Alchemized cover wrote, "I found an NFT interview and a YouTube interview that confirms she does use AI generation and creates NFTs. She uses AI as a tool for overpainting and a foundation." They also allege that the artist has supported positive usage of AI imagery publicly. The same comment thread notes, the artist is listed as Regina Flath, Eva Eller was listed as artist. The artist has said on Instagram on the Goodreads posts that AI was not used in this piece as per request from the publisher. And so these underlined portions are links. If you go to the PDF, you can click on them. This combination of claims and counterclaims that the artist admits to using AI elsewhere, yet denies using it for this particular cover, adds tension. It suggests the possibility of selective disclosure rather than full transparency. On Threads, one post claims, the artist who did the cover for Alchemized also supports AI. On X/Twitter, another post states, Alchemized cover artist admitting to supporting AI and having used it before. Oh, I hope to God she didn't use it for a base layer. These are public expressions of suspicion rooted in observable artist behavior in related domains, NFTs, AI art, and the aesthetic cues in the cover itself. Meanwhile, among fandom discussion threads, some pushback. A user responded to AI accusations by sharing a link. The illustrator said on the Goodreads post that AI was not used in the creation of this. The publisher insisted on AI not being used. Thus, the discourse around the cover is contested. Fans point to AI signals and the artist's prior activity. The artist and publisher publicly deny AI involvement. So why these allegations matter? Even if it is not proven that the Alchemized cover was AI generated, the fact that such claims arise so quickly is revealing in and of itself. Here's why this matters. Credibility and trust. In a publication already fraught with questions about originality and fandom exploitation, a lack of clarity about the cover art raises red flags. If the visual layer is opaque, readers may question what else is hidden. Layered exploitation. Alchemized is criticized for repurposing fanfiction into a commercial product. If its visual assets are likewise tied to AI, built on datasets of artists' work without consent, then the project doubles down on exploiting creative labor, first textual, now visual. Visual continuity undermines rewrite claims. Retaining the same or affiliated visual collaborators from the fandom era, especially if those artists are known to use AI in other works, weakens marketing claims that Alchemized is a wholly separate original work. The artwork becomes another bridge back to Manacled. Artists labor under threat. Across publishing, there is a growing resistance to using AI-generated covers precisely because such practices undercut freelance illustrators. When major publishers condone or ignore AI art, they further the displacement of human artists who rely on fair contracts. For instance, when Tor was criticized in 2024 for incorporating AI-generated assets into the cover design of Gothic Canna, it sparked widespread discussion about whether AI should ever supplant human illustrators. Style mimicry and attribution risk. From a technical angle, research has shown that text-to-image models can learn to mimic specific artists' style after exposure. The paper, Glaze, Protecting Artists from Style Mimicry, describes how diffusion models can replicate an artist's visual signature, even from limited samples, unless countermeasures are used. If the Alchemized cover draws too heavily, intentionally or not, from the style of Manacled art, then AI tools trained on fandom art archives could infringe that style without consent. A telling contradiction. It is especially telling that the Alchemized marketing claims it has distanced itself from its Manacled roots, that it's no longer a Harry Potter-based work. Yet in retaining the same visual collaborators, or ones tied to the fandom, possibly using or flirting with AI techniques, the book's production seems to preserve links to fandom aesthetics even as it verbally disavows them. If the publisher were serious about a clean break, one might expect them to commission entirely new visual voices with clear statements about methods, AR manual. Instead, the strategy suggests they value visual continuity and the implicit associations it brings, perhaps believing that fans will draw the connection anyway, whether or not it's declared. That decision says as much about branding as it does about visual ethics. Then they go to analyze part of the cover. So we have 1, architectural and background texture. Notice the heavy swirl-like brushwork that repeats unnaturally across the background. These whorls don't resemble consistent brush strokes. They look like algorithmic painterly noise, which is a hallmark of diffusion model outputs. So essentially what they're saying is, if you've seen those DIY projects where people get a print and then they use like a gesso or like clear paint essentially to paint over the top so it looks like a painting when they hang it up, that's kind of what they're talking about. Ideally, when you're doing that DIY project, you should be following the shape of the items, but people often don't. So it's like, yeah, there's paint strokes, but it doesn't match what the actual image is supposed to be. They also note that the architectural spires taper inconsistently. Their lines curve and melt into each other instead of following architectural logic. I mean, yeah. I don't really think it even looks like a building. The central figure in the red cloak, the figure is oddly undefined in anatomy. The legs blur into the ground and the shadow seems pasted rather than cast realistically. The cloak folds lack consistent lighting, instead showing smudged transitions common in AI renders. The proportions, head to body ratio, posture, feel slightly off in ways human illustrators usually correct. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to see this far away, but there's kind of red blending into the shadow, which is weird. Gate and foreground lines. The wrought iron gate has tangled, inconsistent geometry. The top lattice bends randomly, and parts of the skeletal motif fade into visual noise. There are doubled and half-drawn lines that don't connect, another frequent AI tell. Human illustrators working in Gothic styles typically maintain sharp, intentional line work. Here it looks algorithmically guessed. At the very least, it feels kind of sketchy, like someone was just scribbling with a pen. And then we have their closing remarks. So at every level, Alchemized is presented as something new, a bold fantasy debut, a separate work untethered from Harry Potter. But once the context is examined, that claim doesn't hold. The textual foundation is still Manacled, a Harry Potter fanfiction whose plot, characters, and reputation were transplanted into print. The marketing strategy leans on that fanfiction origin, making former Dramini fic its most viral selling point. The cultural impact cannot be divorced from Rowling's legacy, which continues to harm trans communities who once turned to fandom for safety. The visual presentation, with cover art flagged for AI-style anomalies and tied to artists who previously used AI, compounds these contradictions, especially given the continuity with Manacled's own fan art. What emerges is not a clean break, but a case study in layered exploitation. The unpaid labor of fandom repackaged as original, the cultural capital of a harmful IP leveraged for profit, and the possibility of AI art replacing human illustrators. Each layer strips away trust, transparency, and the values that sustain fan and queer communities. Readers deserve honesty about what they are supporting. Artists deserve compensation and credit for their work. And communities, especially those most harmed by Rowling's rhetoric, deserve better than to see their worlds recycled into profit without accountability. In the end, Alchemized is not just a novel, it is a reminder of the responsibility publishers, authors, and readers bear when we decide which stories and which systems we elevate. If we want an industry that values originality, protects queer and trans voices, and respects creative labor, we must be willing to critique works like this and demand more from the books that claim our attention. So that was a lot. We went over the movie deal, how people are trying to claim it's not connected to Manacled, people's thoughts about its tie back to JKR's IP, the advertising, and what it is or is not doing. Finally, people trying to address the fact it got less hate in general. And then the final statement by Shelf Indulgence. Personally, I won't be buying the book. I wouldn't say the sample's bad, but the info dumping is boring. And it's just such a shame because I feel like it could be a really interesting concept. Like, you know, Gideon the Ninth does a lot of similar things with necromancy, specifically in the ninth house. They are reusing people's bodies and bones to work in the house, and then also exploring the different types of necromancy in each of the 9 houses. You know, it's treated differently, that sort of thing. So it's like it could have been something. I wish the author had chosen to not use their pen name and not rely on it being an HP fanfic. That's the only conclusion you can draw. Or at least that's the only conclusion I can draw after going through all of that. They are specifically leaning on it, but not really leaning on it because it's going to get them a ton of money. Like if the author had come out of nowhere with it, trying to get it published, I honestly don't think it ever would have made it. What do you think about this whole situation? Are you okay with what Sin Lin Yu has done? Or do you think they should have definitely approached this from a different angle? Well, that is all for now. I will see you next time.